Welcome back now to the other big story, the president's bombshell decision to publicly release classified documents that are directly related to the investigation into his own campaign team and their contacts with Russia. As we speak, the intelligence community is scrambling to review those documents to make sure that releasing them will not pose a danger to national security. So here's what the president is calling for. President Trump wants to declassify and release 21 pages of a highly sensitive federal surveillance application against his former aide, Carter Page. He also wants the release of FBI interviews that went into preparing the application. Second, the president wants the release of scores of text messages from current and former Department of Justice and FBI officials, including former FBI Director Jim Comey, former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, former agent Peter Strzok, former FBI lawyer Lisa Page, and DOJ official Bruce Ohr. So let me start by explaining the surveillance application, how this thing works. It was used to obtain authorization that let the government conduct surveillance on Carter Page for nearly a year, starting in the fall of 2016. But Republicans argue that it should have never been authorized in the first place because it relied on information in the so-called Steele dossier. And they believe that by declassifying more of the application, it will prove that the FBI got the warrant under false pretenses. Devin Nunes is one of the lawmakers who has been calling for this, and here's what he said back in July.
Those of us who have been providing oversight over this issue, we've had several of our members who have been painstakingly going through it piece by piece, and we are quite confident that once the American people see these 20 pages, at least for those that will get real reporting on this issue, they will be shocked by what's in that FISA application.
The argument from the president and his allies goes like this. The Steele dossier is just a partisan document full of made-up allegations paid for by the Clinton campaign. The FBI used it to obtain the FISA warrant, and because of that, some Republicans say the warrant itself is illegitimate. They also say the FBI lied to the court, proving they are corrupt and out to get the president and his allies. In other words, it's all a witch hunt. But hold on a minute. How about some facts? Previously released information shows the FBI did tell the judges about the Steele dossier, and it shows that the FBI had suspicions about Page and his Russian contacts that went far beyond what Steele had uncovered. What's more, the FBI had to apply for surveillance warrants 4 different times in front of 4 different judges. All of those judges were appointed by Republican presidents. The warrants were approved every single time. Each judge finding the government showed probable cause that Page was acting as an agent of Russia. Now, Democrats, they are furious, insisting that the president is only releasing the top secret information in order to help himself politically.
Well, I think it's first and foremost a way of Donald Trump helping his own defense, providing these materials to his own legal defense team. This is coordinated between the president and his allies, and the precedent and the policy and the norm that we've had since Watergate, that a president does not interfere in specific cases at justice, let alone in one in which the president himself may be implicated, is shattered.
Let's be clear. There is no question that the president has the authority to do this. He can declassify anything he wants. But in doing so, he appears to have caught even his own intelligence officials way off guard. A Justice Department spokesperson said that the president's order has triggered a declassification review by the FBI, the Justice Department, the White House counsel, and the Director of National Intelligence. But an official with direct knowledge tells NBC that the agencies will not be able to do a damage assessment on the text messages because there's simply too many of them.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.